couple of speakers have been arranged by Nicola from Arts Catalyst, who will do an intro to their work in a moment. And the theme is on man-made clouds. And the two speakers tonight are Helen Evans from HeHe, who's also here to talk about the book, and Malcolm Miles. I'll pass over to Nicola Triscott, who is the director of Arts Catalyst.
So yeah, as John said, I'm Nicola Triscott. I'm the founding director of Arts Catalyst. And Arts Catalyst has been around now for 23 years. We're an arts commissioning organisation. We commission new artist projects that engage with science and technology, experimentally and critically, and we try and explore the intersections between culture, science, technology, and society. I'm also, for a link here, a doctoral candidate at the University of Westminster. I think I'm allowed to say candidate now that I've actually put the thesis in. I've had the privilege of working with HeHe, Helen Evans and Heiko Hansen on 3 occasions over the lifetime of Arts Catalyst. I think the first was 10 years ago now, when we did our second International Artists Air Show, and HeHe showed their Air de Londres project and Smoking Lamp, both of which are in the new book that they've published, which I'll talk about shortly. Then we commissioned a work that's from another strand of their practice called Emblem, which is an autonomous rail vehicle. And then in 2013, we co-commissioned with FACT in Liverpool the wonderful Fracking Futures project, which I think is also in the book. So I think Emblem is the only one that doesn't quite fit in this strain of practice. And I think that's what's completely extraordinary about HeHe's. They have such a dedicated and coherent artistic practice of work that is sometimes in galleries, but more often these kind of actions and interventions in the public realm that create images in your mind that stick for a very, very long time, and that are very powerful and also very playful. And it's extraordinary that they can produce a book this big and not a word in excess. And this is just one strand of their practice. This is the Man-Made Clouds book, which examines and reflects on their work relating to the air that we breathe and the clouds that we make through a series of essays and project write-ups. I've actually been carrying it around with me, reading it, counterintuitive to the kind of aerial nature of their work and the kind of micro nature of their work. This is absolutely enormous and very weighty to carry around, which kind of indicates the extent and the import of their of their aerial practice. I was kind of thinking a bit about, which I think Malcolm also addresses in his essay in the book, Sloterdijk's Terror from the Air, when he argued that the 20th century has been witness to a terrorized airspace in which people have become deprived of their natural and assumed right to breathable air. And Sloterdijk identifies the starting point of this age of atmospheric terrorism as the First World War in 1915, when Germany first used chemical gas as a weapon. But of course, I think we're all now very aware of all the different man-made clouds and emissions that we put into the air, and how they've taken away our comfort feeling that this thin blue line in which we live is a right. And something that I've been really interested in, particularly over the last 10 years, is this idea of a planetary commons, of those international and supranational and transnational spaces of natural resources, the atmosphere, the polar regions, the deep seas, outer space, biodiversity, perhaps even our underlying geologies, which are not just providers of common pool resources for all of us, but for generations and ancestors to come. And I don't know other artists who have dealt with this idea quite as strongly and poetically as HeHe have through this extraordinarily long body of work, which Helen is going to show some insights from, I hope. And then Malcolm Miles, who we've also worked with on a couple of occasions, who's the author and professor, was professor of interdisciplinary research at the University of Plymouth, now tells me that he's retired and very sensible too. Looking forward to doing so. His book has been, I think his book, Eco-Aesthetics, is really wonderful. It's a very profound and kind of careful thinking through of the relationship between contemporary art and architecture and climate change, and the roles perhaps that we as cultural practitioners do play and can play in this very complex times in which we find ourselves. So I'm going to hand over to Helen, but I'll first give an unashamed plug for our Conflict Minerals exhibition, which opens on Thursday evening at our Centre for Art, Science and Technology in Cromer Street in King's Cross. Hand over to Helen, thank you.
Thank you, Arts Catalyst and Heather London Laser, for inviting me here today to talk to you, and thank you for coming. So, I'll just show you the first page of this book, which has been a project which we started working on in about 2009, I think, and it's just been released in September. And it's kind of more than an artist's book in a way, because it's it became a project in itself, and so the first page of this book, well, actually perhaps I'll tell you what the contents are. It is a way for us to document our projects that are about man-made clouds, which are a kind of metaphor for talking about air pollution. And so it's also was an opportunity for us to kind of take a step back and research, really, and think about the way that man-made clouds have been represented in the past through mass media, and the way the different kind of meanings that man-made clouds can have, how they're materialised and how they're represented. So we were looking at the 3 chapters in our text, which are about, firstly, tobacco, and the way that tobacco is something that reveals the air space when it first was introduced into Europe. Factory, so the different forms of factories, whether they're incinerators or nuclear power plants or coal-burning plants, or indeed former factories such as the Bankside Power Station, which has now become the Tate Modern. So how this idea of the factory is kind of reinterpreted. And of course also the digital cloud. So those are the 3 kind of sections that we write about. And we invited also 5 authors to make a contribution. So Malcolm Miles wrote an essay which is about the ambiguities and paradoxes of one of our artworks called Nuage Vert. Jean-Marc Chaumas, who's a French fluid dynamics scientist who has been a collaborator, wrote an essay about the way that what scientists can read through the forms of man-made clouds. So it's by studying their flow and their motion. Nortra Mares, who's a sociologist, wrote a very detailed text which analyses the multiple meanings of the Nuage Vert project and the controversies that it raised. And Gunnar Schmidt, who's a German media historian, wrote an essay about the representation of smoke from the phantasmagoria to presence. So it's quite a diverse book that takes on the subject from many different angles. But it was also a kind of work of art in itself, in that the first page of the book is actually made of 100% organic burley tobacco. So here we have the first page of the book, which can actually be smoked. So the book itself, in part at least, is. So the first page is actually a disclaimer, ironical warning that the ideas in this book and any uses of this book and its content are entirely at the risk of the user. And to make this one page of smokable paper, we planted some organic seedlings in an organic farm in Italy, which is a place called Polinaria, which is an art centre and an organic farm. And these seedlings were harvested 4 times in the summer, dried, and then there was a very long, complicated process of turning this material into paper, which was actually done by an artist based in Manchester called Vasim Bhatti. He went through many troubles and trials in turning this pulp into paper, including having an investigation by the Manchester Metropolitan Police for suspicion of carrying illicit substances. So all of these kind of stories are discussed, or narrated in the book as well. And of course we also show our own installations, which are focused on man-made clouds. In a way, combustion is really at the core of everything we do. And we're very interested in this relationship between art and energy, and that if art is a producer of energy, which is often kind of talked about as a producer of energy from Alex Dorner's kind of museum, the powerhouse in the 1920s onwards, then also art consumes and pollutes as well. So that's the other side of the story that we often gets forgotten. So that's the side we like to kind of bring into focus. So I'll just show you a video of Fracking Futures, which was a project which we realised in fact with Arts Catalyst. So the Fracking Futures installation is a very immersive space, which has a lot of, it has a soundtrack that's designed by two sound artists called Dinah Bird and Jean-Philippe Renaud. We worked with them really to make something which was very, has a very deep bass, and it's very, very immersive kind of environment. But there's still elements of humour if we look closely at the installation. You can see that the fracking rig is made out of an old trailer, which has a German brand name called Erde, which means earth. And the drill is actually a handmade Black and Decker drill. So it's all very, very artificial. So we're trying to sort of work on two levels really. But nonetheless, there is a kind of the whole gallery was filled with earth, and there's a kind of hole into the ground from which all the smoke evaporates. And this piece was made at a moment when there had recently been a fracking trial in Blackpool, which is not so far down the road, which had caused earthquakes. So there was a moment in north-west of England that fracking was very much an issue. So we wanted to kind of bring it home, because these technological infrastructures are always so far away from us, and we can never really appropriate them or see them or experience them. So it was about really kind of finding a way to create an image or an experience of this technology. And since fracking, these kind of things are invisible, and fracking in particular happens underground, it's something which is very fertile terrain for our imaginations too. So we also, as part of the mediation of this project, we created some kind of fake articles by the local newspaper, which were kind of telling the story of how FACT Art Centre was actually fracking inside the gallery in order to become energy independent and to raise money at times of austerity. It was exactly the same time as the Cameron cuts against the arts, against all the arts organisations. So it was a way to also kind of play on this idea of how artists have to be autonomous and how far do we have to go for our autonomy. So working in miniature is for us a kind of device, really, of a way of appropriating these large questions about these large infrastructures that which you can get access to, but are not easy to get access to if you want to maintain your artistic freedom, let's say. So we developed this second project, which is called Fleur de Lis. It was originally called China Syndrome, after the film. I don't know if anyone knows the film. Yeah, Faye Dunaway, yeah. Fantastic film, which was released 7 days before the 7 Mile Island, 3 Mile Island, thank you very much, disaster. And in the film, actually, you never see a shot from outside, but we were kind of quite, that's a fantastic film, to see it. So we wanted to make the time we made this piece of work, it was the nuclear industry was kind of coming back into the kind of public debate, really, since, of course, as a solution to climate change. this, I'm going to just pull up some photographs of it. So it becomes a little clearer. So the actual piece is not so big. It's about 80 centimetres wide, and it all takes place inside an aquarium. So it's a three-dimensional model, a kind of sound, light, a kind of three-dimensional theatre cinema set, if you like. But it's a kind of machine. So underneath you have all the kind of all the parts that you need to make it run. So it's working with we're working with a dye in water with some pumps that release the water through the cooling tower, which is a model. And we were working with Jean-Marc Chamas at the Fluid Dynamics Laboratory in Paris to try and make a form of an atomic mushroom. That was our goal in this project. And so we set this atomic mushroom to a sound and light sequence that lasts 16 minutes, and then there's a 4-minute pause until it starts up again. So it's a piece that it's more of a gallery piece, really. It's been shown inside places, but it was also has this kind of scientific laboratory aesthetic, because we kind of like this idea that it looks like a kind of testing bed, or almost as if perhaps scientists in their laboratories might be testing these kind of catastrophes and might be building these kind of simulation models. So that was our thinking behind this. And what is so interesting about radioactivity is, well, if there was a nuclear meltdown in a nuclear power plant, as we saw in Fukushima just a year later after we made this piece, is that, of course, an atomic mushroom would not come. An atomic mushroom is a sign from, of course, war, which we're bringing together into a sign of a civic use of nuclear energy. So these two images are colliding into one, which is an impossibility, but it's a space of your imagination. And of course, radioactivity is all about imagination, because it can't be seen. Again, once again, it's something which is invisible, which can't be seen, which we have to believe in. We have to believe the Geiger counters, and we have to believe the authorities that the Chernobyl cloud stopped at the French border. So we called it China Syndrome, and then we actually had an interesting discussion with a place to show it, which happened to be the Foundation EDF in Paris, which is co-partners with Eraser. So they were not at all happy they were very unsure about whether it would be possible to show this piece, and they're particularly unsure about the title, which was at that time China Syndrome, based on this idea that in a nuclear meltdown in America, that there could be a hole going right through the earth to China, which is the premise of the film, China Syndrome. So then after this kind of dialogue we had with the Foundation EDF, we came up with this new title, which was Fleur de Lis, which is a kind of in honour of the Fleur de Lis, which is a kind of symbol for the French monarchy and, by extension, the French state, who, of course, have a huge stake in nuclear energy in France. So one last, I can show you maybe perhaps a few close-ups, because what we like about this installation, it's always very difficult to show it because you have to have a water supply and it needs a bit of maintenance. But what's very nice about it is that it's always different, and so you always have this green cloud, which is, always doing something new, always in movement. And it was very difficult getting the LEDs waterproof inside the tower. One last project, if I've got time, which is, I've just showed the Nuage Vert project, because it's quite nice to go from all these miniatures and models into something which is actually real in full city scale, which is of course, working on that kind of scale is much more time-consuming in terms of making these kind of projects happen. This video is from Ivry-sur-Seine in 2010, and what we're looking at is a laser beam an 8-watt laser beam, which is being controlled by a computer, which is attached to a thermographic camera. And of course, the steam coming out of the chimney is hot. So the thermographic camera can detect the shape of the cloud, and then in software we can draw an outline and then project with a laser beam using 2 mirrors, which make it control the X and Y coordinates back onto the cloud. So all this process happens before the cloud's actually moved. And it's a project that began in 2004 or something as an idea, and an idea that we wanted to realise, but nobody believed that we could, and everyone said you'll never get it done, because we wanted to do it in a certain way, which was to do it with the power plant owner and to use the cloud as a kind of surface to talk about what was actually happening inside the factory. Of course, any owner of a power plant, that's the last thing they actually want you to do is to colour their cloud in green with a laser beam, or to talk about what they're actually doing. But after a very long process in Helsinki, of about 4 years of negotiation, we managed to build up a kind of partnerships with enough local actors, and the power plant in the end agreed to participate in the project. And in the process of participating, they agreed to also develop a kind of predictive consumption map, which would enable them to determine, based on the current weather, what the electricity consumption should be in this temperature, based on previous years, and then they could detect a drop. Because how could you detect a drop of energy use? I mean, it's moving all the time, energy use. It's always going up and down. So using this information, we would control the size of this green projection. So we asked people to consume less energy, and if they consumed less energy, then the cloud would become bigger. So it was like a kind of an offering of a sacrifice which we would give to the artwork. So it's about giving your energy to the artwork so the artwork could be bigger and more beautiful. Well, that was a great success in Helsinki, and then the following year we wanted to redo this installation in Paris, and in a very different context, whereas in Helsinki we were working with a coal-burning power plant in the city centre, almost in the city centre, in Ruoholahti, if anyone knows Helsinki. But it's surrounded by residential buildings. And in the suburbs of Paris, it's a very different context, of course. These are incinerators, so they're burning household waste to produce energy. And they're areas which are, perhaps the city of Paris doesn't have such a positive view of their kind of efforts in ecology, let's say. Whereas I think there's a more positive outlook in Helsinki. So for one reason or another, in Paris, the project was censored. It was blocked. We received, in our attempt to gain their agreement, we received instead letters from the police saying that we were not allowed to do this. So, of course, we did it anyway. So this is a video from 2010 in the suburbs of Ivry-sur-Seine. Thank you very much.
My first thought was with the tobacco in your book. Are there any issues there with the growing and then distribution of it?
Yeah, we didn't ask for any kind of... We just did it, and we couldn't ask for any permissions. I don't know. We did wonder about that, about how you import or transport tobacco from one country to another, because surely it's there are. You would have thought it would be some kind of legal control.
So what was the interest that the police showed in it?
Because I don't know why, but. Barty, our friend up in Manchester, had converted under a railway arch. Had a whole laboratory going to develop this product, because actually we only had 1,000 seedlings, but with 4 harvests, that created quite a lot of material. And there's maybe 2,000 sheets of...
I can see how a railway arch grow room might be.
There were maybe a couple of freezers with, material.
So another. I'll pass this open a minute. The later projects that you showed. What are your thoughts about, say, blurring or not making the distinction, say, between the cooling tower, the water vapour, and the smoke? There seems to be some kind of projection onto the cooling tower of water vapour as being a toxic thing too.
It's interesting in Paris, whenever they talk about, for example, an incinerator or a coal burning power plant, they always talk about it being 99% water vapour. Of course, they never talk about what the other 1% is. And of course, a nuclear power plant is vapour. But in our imaginations, since we, as ordinary citizens, it's very difficult to access these places. I think in the 70s you could go and visit your local nuclear power plant and get a tour around them, but nowadays that's all finished. So our only kind of interface with these sites is actually the cloud. The only sign that they're working is the cloud. And so it's onto the cloud that we project our imagination as to what they could be burning inside. And so there's all these kind of, mythologies, if you like, of kind of, the cloud turned pink because they were burning some copper and magnesium, I don't know, from an industrial site, or So in a way, the cloud is like our only. It's a perfect interface because, of course, also a cloud can transport us into all kinds of spaces.
Sure. Other questions from the audience for Helen? Yes. Matt will bring you a mic.
Thank you. The glow on the fleur-de-lis reactor was amazing. Do you know, is that a property of the dye that you were using? Does that fluoresce of itself, or can you just shine bright LEDs into any particles and get a good effect? If I want to do that in an aquarium at home,
yeah, we use a phosphorescent dye which reacts to UV light, but it also reacts to white light, and it will behave differently depending on how close the light source is. And I mean, you can make it white or you can make it green depending on what light you throw at it, really. Or blue.
Right, thank you.
Not so much a question as a comment, because you have this theme of the invisible running through it, and a distinctly ominous, at the same time incredibly beautiful quality to what you do. And a cloud coming out of a chimney is typically about half and half CO2 and water vapour. So that's the ominous half.
Oh yeah, sure,
yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. In a coal burning
yes,
power plant.
yes. Anything that's burning will be producing
absolutely.
approximately half an hour.
Yes, but sometimes they have a long process of washing the fumes.
Yes. So there will be more water vapours too. Yes, yes. But I think for many people looking at it, they will feel that this is more than anything a kind of a climate issue related artwork.
In the book,
that's what I see in it.
Yeah, absolutely. In the book, there's a very nice collection of different posters made from, for example, the Russian Revolutionary era, where smokestacks are used as kind of flags for
symbols of the great kind of efficiency of their industrial.
The meaning of these clouds is never fixed, but of course, in more recent times, the meaning of them is pollution, or for example, the poster of An Inconvenient Truth. The smoke cloud becomes the cyclone, which is a bit like Hurricane
and
Katrina.
even those Russian clouds get satirised by Tintin, I seem to recall.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Thank you.
Any others? I was thinking the same thing as Paul, and I was thinking about this afternoon, the changing nature of those kind of industrial clouds as being once a symbol of kind of progress and modernity, and now a symbol, a different type of symbol. Do you have anything further to
Yeah,
in
I
relation
think
to that?
that's what's interesting about them, is that just like natural clouds, their meanings are not fixed, and they do change with the issues. You know, the cloud can take so many different forms, and it's used so often nowadays in advertising, and you know, it's used all the time to send a message. So it could be about, you know, the privatisation of our airspace through the carbon trading. You know, what it could be used to critique, what it could be used as a electronic music kind of gig. You know, it's like, it's so diverse because it can be morphed into any form, the cloud.
Okay.